was a cold, cold winter's night. In a cottage in the country, tucked away beneath the hills, a little boy lay sleeping. Snow began to fall lightly at first, and then with giant flakes which started to settle on the ground. At first light of the morning, the boy turned over. He yawned and sat up and ran to the window and looked out. Everything was covered in snow. The garden, the fields, the distant hills. He got dressed as fast as he could, and when he was ready, he hurried down the stairs. At the back door, he put on his boots, his scarf, and his woolly hat, and then walked out into the snow. And it was at exactly this moment that he got the idea of building a snowman. The size of a large man, and a great big snowball to go on top of it. Then he fetched a scarf and a hat, and a tangerine for the nose, and coal for the eyes. At last the snowman was finished, and the boy stepped back and looked at him. He seemed to be smiling. By this time it was getting dark, and the little boy had to go indoors, leaving the snowman standing all alone out in the middle of the garden. It was time to go to bed, and soon the boy was fast asleep. But in the middle of the night, he woke. He got up and tiptoed down the stairs, feeling rather cold, and looked out at the snowman through the glass panels of the front door. Suddenly, while the boy was looking at him, the snowman moved, and he actually started to walk towards the boy. And they shook hands. "Come in," said the boy. "I'd love to," said the snowman. And together they tiptoed into the living room. The snowman thought it was wonderful. In fact, the snowman sat himself down in a comfortable armchair. And then, with a start, the boy realized that the snowman was sitting a little too near the fire. He realized that he might melt if he got too hot, so he pulled him out of the chair and hurried him out of the room to the kitchen, which was cold and dark. He leaned down and opened the fridge, and a waft of cold air came out. The snowman loved it. For him, it was just like sunbathing. "Let's go upstairs," said the boy, and in the boy's playroom was a music box. They wound it up, and then they danced to the music. they both collapsed on the floor, with balloons and teddy bears all around them. "I've got another idea," said the boy. "Come with me and let's look out the window." Outside, they could see a strange dark object. Nodding to each other, they tiptoed silently down the stairs, out through the front door and into the open air. The dark object seemed much bigger now that they were close to it, and whatever it was covered up with a big black tarp. Summoning all his strength, the boy went up and pulled it off, and standing there was a bright, shiny, new motorbike. The boy pointed out the controls to the snowman, turned the key in the ignition, turned on the headlight, and suddenly the snowman was on the bike and racing around the garden. For a second he stopped, and the little boy jumped on behind him, and then they were off. They came back to the garden. Without warning the snowman, the boy gripped the snowman gripped the boy firmly by the hand and began to run. They ran out across the garden, and they ran faster and faster and bounding and jumping until suddenly the boy realized that they were flying. Walking in the air. We're floating in the moonlit sky. The people far below are sleeping as we fly. On across the world, the villages go by like dreams. The rivers and the hills, the forests and the stream. Children gaze open-mouthed, taken by surprise. Nobody down below believes their eyes. We're surfing in the air. We're swimming in the frozen sky, drifting over icy mountains, floating by. planted silently in the frozen north. All around them was a great forest of pine trees laden with snow. But somewhere ahead, they could hear music and begin to see lights. Why, there at a clearing, a Christmas party was taking place, and all the people at the party were snowmen. More snowmen than you could ever imagine in your life. And right in the middle of them, radiating good cheer and smiling from ear to ear, was Father Christmas himself. "You're just in time for the dance of the snowmen," he chuckled, and he clicked his fingers. When the party was all over, Father Christmas led the boy and the snowman to a stable, and light spilled through the door, and inside they could see the reindeer which he used to pull his sleigh. Father Christmas gave the boy a lovely blue scarf as a present, and he put it on. But finally it was time for them to go. The snowman gripped the boy's hand, and once again they started to run. Faster and faster and faster, and bounding and jumping until they were flying again. And at last they landed in the garden and together walked slowly to the house. The little boy shook hands with his friend the snowman and went up to the front door. But the snowman waved and the boy ran back and gave him a great big hug. Then the boy went indoors and very soon was fast asleep. The next morning, when he woke up, the room was ablaze with sunlight, and he put on his dressing gown and ran downstairs, opened the front door, and the sun felt so warm on his face. He ran out into the garden and saw a little heap of melted snow, an old hat, a tangerine, a scarf, and a few lumps of coal, but the snowman was nowhere to be seen. For a moment, the boy thought perhaps the adventures of the night before had been nothing but a dream. But then he felt in his pocket, and the scarf that Father Christmas had given him was still there.